Leaders of the 17 eurozone countries, plus European central bankers and commissioners, will hold an emergency summit in Brussels on Thursday in the latest, probably the biggest effort to settle Europe's sovereign debt crisis. The stakes are huge, with the leaders under enormous pressure from the markets, the Americans, and the vulnerable parties in the eurozone to agree a new rescue package for Greece and, more broadly, to ring-fence the euro. To discuss this long-running crisis, we are joined on the line by Janis Emmanouilidis, Senior Policy Analyst at the European Policy Centre in Brussels. Now, Mr. Emmannouilidis, will EU leaders manage to agree on a second bailout package for Greece at the summit on Thursday?
It seems likely that they will agree on a package. The question is on what kind of package they will agree on, because what is now necessary in the current situation is a rather bold reaction to the markets, to developments taking place, because this is no longer a Greek or Portuguese or an Irish or a peripheral crisis. It is a crisis which has reached the core of the eurozone.
What kind of an agreement can we expect?
Well, it will be resting probably on different pillars. One pillar being that there is a likelihood that Greek bonds will be sold from the secondary market, will be purchased from the secondary markets. The question is through which means, whether there will be an additional loan given to the Greeks to do so. We might see decrease of interest rates, an increase of maturity buybacks to return them the loans which have been given to Greece. We might even see additional elements of what we now call a new mini Marshall Plan or a New Deal, whatever you want to call it, in order to stimulate growth. So it is a rich menu from which there is the member states can choose, and the question is what they will in the end be able to agree on.
If an agreement is not reached, what will the repercussions be for Greece and for the eurozone as a whole?
If there's no agreement whatsoever, this will send a huge negative signal to the markets, which would mean that the crisis will deepen in those countries which are already affected, so Greece, Portugal, and Ireland, but also that chances are high that it will spread to other member states, whether that's Spain or Italy or Belgium, we will see. But the likelihood of that happening is high, so that's why I think they will come out with some kind of agreement. The question is whether this agreement will be sufficient.
Now, almost every economist believes that at some stage Greece will default. Do you share this view?
Well, it depends on what you mean by default. I think what most economists are sure about is that no country is able to cope with debt which is beyond 150% of its national GDP. So you need to do something about that immense level of debt. And the question is what can be done in order to cope with that. And then there comes the question of how to reduce it, whether that's through a restructuring, through a buyback on the secondary market, to a selective default. There are different ways of doing that, and it's also important at which time you're doing it. Do you do it now when there still is a primary deficit? Do you do it later when Greece has come out of the most severe of situations? So the issue of timing is also important, and it's also you need the consensus from every actor involved. And in this case, you need the okay or consensus from the European Central Bank, and this is one of the big question marks still out there.
What do you believe should be done?
Well, I think that first of all, you need really a bold reaction. So from the menu which I have mentioned earlier, you would probably have to do all of that. You would have, in order to convince the markets that you're ready to not only defend the peripheral countries, but the euro as such, because this is, as I said in the beginning, no longer a Greek or a Portuguese or Irish crisis, but a euro crisis. So you need to send out a signal that you're ready to defend the common currency, the stability of the common currency, and that means that you need to defend the weakest parts in the game, which in this case probably is Greece.
Looking beyond the economic realm, what are the possible social and political spillover effects that this crisis may have?
We do not know. What we know is that it has political and social consequences. We see it in certain member states. We can see it obviously in those countries which are affected most by the crisis. But we can also see it on the European level. We can witness in the last 16 to 18 months an increasing distrust among member states. Also increasing disattachment between national capitals and Brussels. So the political climate within the European Union is especially within the eurozone, has become rougher, has become more difficult, and that has repercussions which are difficult to evaluate, and it has also effects which take time, because we know that every economic and financial crisis there's a time lag between the crisis itself and political or socio-economic effects of it. So it's difficult to give a prognosis of what the effects will be, but one can be sure that there are negative spillovers from that crisis onto the political scene already.
How intertwined are the crises on both sides of the Atlantic?
There is certainly a connection between both. If on one side of the Atlantic, whether in Europe or in the U.S., things go wrong, that has negative repercussions. However, there's a big difference between both sides of the Atlantic, which is that even if the U.S. are having problems in finding a solution, a compromise, the Obama administration